Hey everybody, it's Andrew Cady with the Epic Mortgage team. Going to do a little bit longer than normal video here, so bear with me as I break down the Fed's monetary policy that was released yesterday and then recap the press conference afterwards. If you notice me looking over to the side today, it's because I have a lot of notes. I don't normally take notes on these type of videos. I normally just, get them done, but there's a lot of things to cover, and I think it's a video you're going to want to watch. So stick with me here. So as expected, yesterday, the Fed raised the federal funds rate by 0.75%. As I referenced in my previous video, no big change in markets initially over it. It was what was exactly expected the Fed to do. But also, as we've made comments many, many times in the past, that the press conference that follows the Fed monetary policy can oftentimes move markets. And we most certainly have seen that happen. The Fed's press conference was met with a tone that we really haven't seen in quite some time. It was met with a very solemn tone, and there was a lot of things that were digested out that kind of paint a bleak outlook for the economic future over the next few years. So let's break some of these things down. First and foremost, I think the interesting thing I did notice is that Fed Chair Powell used the word restrictive 9 times during this press conference. Restrictive monetary policy is what he kept referencing. And his definition of a restrictive monetary policy is something that would put meaningful down pressure on inflation. And so let's break some of these things down. So one of the big things that came out in this press conference was reference to GDP. GDP is the gross domestic product of the United States. That basically measures whether our economy is contracting or whether it's expanding. In June of this year, their estimations for GDP for 2022 was at 1.7% growth for America. Just a few months later, at the end of September, they are now cutting that number back from 1.7% to 0.2%. That's a massive, massive decrease. They've also revised the projections for 2023 to show a slower than expected pace of growth of 1.2%. Here's where some of the things kind of got interesting. The Fed funds rate, they had in June predicted that the federal funds rate would end up in 2022 around 3.4%. Now, keep in mind, we're already at 3%. We were at 0 at the beginning of the year. So we've raised 3% this year. And we got that extra 0.75% hit, which put us at 3%. And now they've revised their estimation from 3.4% at the end of 2022 up to 4.4% for 2022. And it's a big increase, and that definitely shook the markets just a little bit, to say the least. And then they are now projecting for 2023 additional small increase to 4.6%. Before coming down to 3.9% in 2024 and then 2.9% in 2025, painting a picture that at the end of 2025, we should be very similar Fed funds rate to where we are at today. Now, let's talk about inflation, because that is why they're raising the Fed funds rate. That's the whole purpose behind this thing, is to combat inflation. So what are they expecting for inflation? Well, they're looking at the PCE measurement, the personal consumption expenditure measurement. That's not the CPI report we see, but it's, somewhat apples for apples. Right now, the PCE report is currently at 6.3%. They're expecting that number to come down only to 5.4% in 2022. They'll make some gains, but not as far as they want to go. Now, keep in mind, the Fed, their monetary policy of putting downward pressure on inflation is until they get that PCE down to 2%. So they're expecting at the end of this year to be at 5.4%. By the end of 2023, they expect it to be around 2.3%, or sorry, 2.8% in 2023, and then 2.3% in 2024, returning to their target level in 2025. Now, what does this do to the economy when the Fed is raising interest rates for this long of a period? Well, the big R word was asked by multiple reporters, and it was avoided as best as possible. Big R word meaning recession. Does this mean we are heading for a recession? And Fed Chair Powell, they've always said they're aiming for a soft landing, and soft landing meaning ability to control inflation without entering recession. His stance said, and I quote, "Soft landing chances will diminish as the Fed tightens their policy." And it's referenced in what they spoke about for unemployment. Right now, unemployment sits right about 3.8%, and they do expect unemployment to rise in 2023 to 4.4%. That's about 1.3 million job losses expected over the next 12 to 14, 16 months as a result of the Fed's tightening of their monetary policy. Interestingly enough, they expect that 4.4% unemployment rate to remain all the way through 2024, coming down to 4.3% in 2025, and then no real projections beyond that. Now, Fed Powell did make reference that over the last 3 months, we've averaged 378,000 job gains, which is a robust job market. But he did not make any reference or explanation to the fact that the vast majority of those job creations over the last 3 months are part-time, second and third jobs. So really what the Fed is painting a picture of is that we are entering a time where the Fed is going to make very restrictive moves to slow our economy, essentially pushing us into the recession that needs to happen. And I say needs to happen, and I want to make it abundantly clear to the people that are watching this: recessions are a necessary thing. They get this big, bad, evil, ugly reputation. And trust me, nobody wants to lose a job. Nobody wants, a bad economic position. But it's also important to understand that recessions are cyclical. And if you take the pandemic, very short-lived recession we've been in one of the longest bull markets in our history. And so we are long due for a recession. And this is not necessarily going to be the end of the world. It's actually not. A lot of opportunities can arise out of recession. One additional thing he did mention is that housing market has been running extremely hot. And we all know this. We look back at 2020. In 2021, we saw home prices appreciate or increase somewhere around 28 to 29%. And Fed Chair Powell did reference that he does expect to see some kind of a correction in housing, not a bubble, not a collapse. And it's important to break that down because there is a difference between it. A lot of times when you talk about a correction, it's in the neighborhood of about a 10% drop off. Well, if you take that number and you say, let's, for easy math, let's say we average 30% gain over the last 2 years, and we have a 10% decrease in home values this year. That still means that on a 3-year average, we averaged over 6% appreciation, over 6.5% appreciation, even if we decrease home values this year. That's still well above a national average. And honestly, I'm one that is a proponent of housing, but we have to be honest with ourselves that the rate of appreciation and the rate of home price increases we've seen over the last 2 years is simply not sustainable. What we're seeing right now is lower class families and the majority of middle class families are simply locked out of home ownership. Interest rates have come up as much as they have. You couple that with home prices going up as much as they have, it's made housing unaffordable. So this is a necessary step to correct the economic position on the recession side, but also on the housing side, to put us back into a position where we can have multiple years of gain and growth in this country. One thing Fed Chair Powell said that I did find pretty interesting is he said the current situation is outside of historical experience. And I would wholeheartedly agree. And there's a lot of people out there, they're thumping their books saying, well, we got charts that say this should happen. The reality is we've never really entered the waters we're in right now. When you print nearly 80% of the currency that is in circulation in the last 36 months, when the Fed's balance sheet is almost $9 trillion, when the federal funds rate's only at 3% and you walk into a recession, there's no real history books that can tell us exactly where this is going to go. And I think that's very, very important to understand is this is going to be a fluid situation. It's going to be something that we don't really know the exact outcome. As Fed Chair Powell said, and I'll quote him, if the economy follows the path that he referenced here, this would be a pretty good outcome. And, you say, well, 1.3 million job losses, home values potentially correcting, recession, that's a pretty good outcome. And honestly, it is. If you look at the current economic situation of our country, it actually would be a really good outcome. And so I think it's important to understand these things happen in cycles. Batten down the hatches, buckle your seatbelts, keep your arms and legs inside the ride, because it's probably going to get wild over the next few months. But we're here. We're here to provide you guys updates. I'm not here just to, just to blow wind on a fire and keep everybody fired up. I'm also here to bring you guys the real news, the relevant news, the reality of what's happening. And I hope that it's appreciated that I dive into some of these things, because it's not fun topics to talk about. Nobody likes doing negative, quote unquote, negative videos. I like to find a positive spin on everything, even when there isn't one. We still have to look at the fact that recessions create massive, massive, massive opportunities, and housing market corrections create massive, massive opportunities for people that would, in a situation like today, not be able to afford housing, will again be able to afford housing. People that are in a situation where they have some money on the sidelines will be able to invest when we get to these recessionary moments and create wealth for their families. So I try to break down as much as I can on this meeting. If you guys have additional questions, you want to dive deeper onto any of these topics, I probably only covered a third of the notes I made, but I don't want to keep looking and reading. It's just my type of thing I don't like to do. Appreciate you guys' time today. If you need me, reach out to me. Hit me up on any social media channel at Epic Mortgage Guy or at Epic Mortgage Team. You can call me 904-500-EPIC. I appreciate your time today, and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Take care.